Teachers of Reddit, has a student ever offered sexual favors in exchange for a better grade? If so, how did they ask you? No, but I did have a student say that if I didn't improve her grade she'd tell someone I'd made a pass at her, and the bad grade was retaliation for rejecting it. I had to remind her that 1. I graded on a rubric, and retained copies of all student work. I was an early advocate of digital submissions, and did my grading using track changes. 2. I had a policy of never being the room alone with a student with such accusations in mind. I had a policy of never being the room alone with a student with such accusations in mind. Who else was there when she made her threat? One of my old coworkers told me a story once that his first year he had a student come in after class. She came to his desk and licked her lips and said, "What do we need to do to turn my grade from a D to an A?" He said he just stood up and went directly to the principal. Your coworker did the right thing. Begone. #THOT. I used to teach part-time at a community college. The course that I taught was required for a certification, and it was pass or fail. If a student failed, they could retake the test in 30 days. If they failed again, they would have to retake the entire course. At the time I was early 30s, and I had a student who was early 20s, and very attractive. She had failed the exam, and wanted to discuss it with me. I met with her, and she told me about how important this was to her, and how she would do anything to pass the class. I explained the 30-day policy. She again told me how important it was to her, that she was willing to do anything with emphasis, to be able to pass it now. I just sort of looked at her funny and she said, "Yes, anything." I just said, "You need to study and come back in 30 days. She looked at me like a dejected puppy, then just got up and walked out. She came back in 30 days and passed. Given that you offered the retake after 30 days option, I can't imagine why she wouldn't have opted for that instead of trying to trade sex for a grade. Now if she'd also failed the retake, I could understand getting desperate then. Maybe she was just making a pass at him, and had a teacher fantasy. Not having to come back to take the test would be an added bonus, I suppose. Not for grades, and not really favors, but in a minor way for something really small. A better seat on the minibus we were carting them around in on a week of residential. It's funny looking back on it now, but at the time I was only 25, and it worried the hell out of me. We'd all, a group of about 30 kids and 4 staff. With me the only male staff, been staying in a youth hostel for about 3 days, and on the 4th morning one of the girls, who was about 13, walks straight up to me while we were waiting in the car park, grabs me by the arm and starts rubbing her chest against it, and says something like, "Please can I sit next to other student on the bus today?" I just gave a curt no, and bolted for the security of the female staff, and told them what had happened. The girl got quite the telling off, thank God, but it still worried me for ages that something might come back on me for it. I'd be more worried about why a student immediately defaulted to lewd contact to get what she wanted at 13. I hope someone followed up on her home life with CPS, or talked to her about it beyond her getting quite the telling off. Yeah, that is a telltale sign of abuse. I'm a high school campus security guard, and I work 3 days a week of overtime doing night classes. My campus has adults and HS students at night, so to keep things safe, we have different seating/break areas for them. They are close by where I can see both adults and students. One day, a female HS student was talking to me, and there was music playing nearby. Because of this I couldn't hear as well, and when she asked me a question, I totally misunderstood what she said. What I heard was, "I turn 18 soon. Can I be on the side?" I was like, "You know I'm married, and you're an HS." She says, "What are you talking about?" I ask her to repeat the question. "I turn 18 soon. Can I be on that side?" She wanted to sit on the adult break area. I was red, and I told her no, and forget this happened. She did, and she would just laugh at me when she would walk past me to get on the bus to go home. Alternatively, she was thinking on her feet. Not really relevant, but a pretty good similar story. Math teacher/track coach at my HS gave one of his female students/athletes a thong as a Christmas gift. He did not return for the spring semester. Thank God. I once had a student semi-flash me up her very short skirt, suggesting more could be made available. The look on her face, when it didn't change the look on my face, was priceless. I provided the standard advice about studying. How did you keep a straight face? My jaw rolled, hit the floor. No, but I had a student threaten me with false accusations. Got a little hairy there for a bit, but I came out of it okay. She threatened me she was going to do it. I wrote it all up in a letter, sealed it, and put it in my work file signed by the principal. That way it was on a dated record if she ever did follow through with her threat. That was a really good way to protect yourself. I always read these threads with fear. I was hopelessly in love with my teacher in high school and I cringe thinking about it now. The poor man. Apparently you can show up at his doorstep several years later and it works out. I read that comment too. Like I said on another post quite recently, there are genuine advantages to being quite ugly as a teacher. Saves me a lot of hassle. No, they know we have to immediately report it, so they aren't that forward. They do occasionally try to badly flirt, but I just keep the door open and stand near it, or make sure someone else is in the room. Being a young male teacher can be quite inconvenient sometimes. They don't even have anything important to say, just wasting my break with their terrible attempts at flirting no matter how many times I tell them I have stuff to do. They also do it when they want a grade early too, putting on a sweet voice and asking if I can make an allowance for them. What's the worst attempt at flirting you've ever seen? By Y male models. Not exactly the question, but on the last day of school in the 7th grade, I was vibing with my friends in the choir room when one of the teacher called me up. I went to talk to him, and he said, listen, I need you to know this, but I like you. I was super taken aback, and needed a moment to wrap my head around what was happening. Turns out he was just telling me I was his favorite, and he was glad to have me, though I feel he cold-worded it better. I thought a male teacher told me I love you once, but I was so relieved when I saw he hung up the phone and told me that he was saying it to his wife and not to me. Dear God, that must have been a relief. I once had a student show up into office hours showing a lot of cleavage and flirtatiously asking if there was anything at all she could do to raise her grade. I acted oblivious and excited that she'd decided to get more serious in the class and started listing topics she could study before the final. Her expression was priceless. She just couldn't believe I was that dumb, and she just walked off after a minute. I've been laughing about that for years. Even better, this was the strategy the department told us to try. They wanted us to do that first, just in case the student would be deterred without any extra hassle. I honestly didn't expect it to work, but I was glad to be proven wrong. Mayo, your department had trainings on how to shoo away stupid horny students trying to raise their grades. Never forget that the president of France is married to a former teacher of his, who is 20 years older than him. It was never that blunt, but I've had tons of male students go with straight up flattery always, before hitting me up for extra credit or a grade boost. This past school year I had a student try to target me on a dating app once it became clear he most likely wouldn't pass the class. He went so far as to lie about his age, so he would show up in the search results for, in his words, cougars. I should mention it's at the university level, so not as terrible as it would have been if he was 16, but still unnerving. In college I ended up sleeping with a tar for a class. She was technically my teacher. I brought up with her that I was technically banging my teacher. She wasn't amused. I was like, come on baby, what do I got to do to get an A? And rubbed her thigh. She side-turned and said no. I'm like, come on, we already did it twice tonight. I'm earning my grade. She got flustered and said, holy shit, it's an elective. It's pass or fail. And if I'm grading you on sex you get a D-tops and rolled over. Hair years passing. We can't all be John Holmes with a 13-incher and porn star status. Op, I need to know by Friday. I had a student offer me a little pot for a better grade. She then produced a tiny ceramic pot and gave it to me, even though I didn't touch her grade. I keep that pot in my desk to giggle about on hard days. 3. Best cover story. I remember telling a male high school teacher that if he gave me a higher grade, I would take him out for a steak dinner. Him, you have to be the first person to offer me dinner rather than sex. Me, well, I never have sex on the first date. Anyways, made him laugh. He gave me an extra assignment that was worth a few points. Once had a coworker have this happen to her. Cornered her when she was leaving school one day, and she said no. The student wouldn't give up and started harassing her. Texts, emails, etc. All getting more and more pushy. After he realized it wasn't happening, went to the head and complained that she had made a pass at him, not knowing she was massive lesbian and everyone knew it. It didn't end well for him. So it failed because she was a lesbian. What about all those texts and emails? During my first year of grad school I was the tar for a sophomore organic chemistry lab. One of my students didn't show up one week, then came in the next week with a lab report she shouldn't have been able to do. She handed in a report which made me raise my eyebrows, so I took a look at it. It screamed plagiarism to me, so I pulled her to the side of the lab that didn't have any students in it and handed her lab report back to her. I told her she should take it back, because it's definitely plagiarized, and I would have to give her a 0 for not handing it in. It was my 4th week of grad school. I didn't want to get a student kicked out. A few moments of awkwardly holding out her paper before she grabbed it and looked down. She looked up at me through her lashes, put her hand on my bicep, then asked if there was anything she could do to help me grade her paper. I calmly pushed her hand off my arm. Okay, so first of all we could both get kicked out of school for that. Second of all I'm gay. She just opened her mouth in shock, then slowly turned around and walked back to her spot. The rest of the semester was awkward as hell, and the next semester, when I had her again. Now when I see her she does everything to avoid me, and it's become a running joke in my friend group. Not exactly relevant, but I did have a 10th grade student confess to me once, an introverted and academically smart girl. I was surprised when she just walked into my office, closed the door, and asked me out while crying, most likely fear of rejection. Of course, I rejected her politely, and explained to her why she and I couldn't date, even though she is a sweet girl, age gap, teacher-student imbalance of power, etc. 6 years later, I had all but forgotten of this episode. I came back home from work, pretty bummed over as I got dumped again, even though it was a short fling. When I saw her, she was literally at my doorstep. I couldn't believe my eyes. It turns out she saved my address, that she somehow found out while snooping around my desk back when she was my student. We are now married, counting 12 years, with 3 kids. Op is straight up a teacher from a rom-com anime. Next time on, all I want to do is teach high school, but my student is in love with me and also is a 10,000-year-old shape-shifting alien. Not a teacher, but I've been on the other end of this situation. During my undergrad years a university professor offered myself and another female student a grade of 100% in the class if we would hook up while he watched. Basically told him he could go fuck himself. This guy was a known creep, and has likely slept with other students before. At the annual Christmas party he hosted for the senior and grad students it was common to hear him bragging about the size of his porn collection, and how he and his wife had an open marriage. Not judging that. Consensual non-monogamy is a perfectly dandy way for a couple to live. Just maybe don't discuss it with your students. Short of murdering someone there was nothing that administration would do thanks to that lovely little thing called tenure. I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure tenure does not cover that kind of thing. At the very least, incidents like this should be reported to administration. I feel like that's probably illegal too, especially the part about the percent 100 grade offer. When we tried to say something it basically amounted to what proof do you have? It's your word against his. There are students who push the envelope. Most of them are just playing a game, trying to push buttons. Maybe look for weakness. Some. It may be just the beginning. Teachers need to shut that shit down ASAP. The ones who think maybe the student really is into them because they are soulmates, or whatever need to grow up and find another job, and not in that order. I had a policy not to be alone with a student, which was fine, until 2 students tried to start something. That gets a long writ up to the assistant principal, and it's a whole stupid thing. I feel bad for male teachers at times like this, but also it's really on shady men of the past to set you up as potential creepers. I have had kids offer me money for a better grade. I always just say you can't afford it and laugh. Horny teenager makes post to get sexy sex replies, coincidentally from other horny teenagers pretending to be teachers. You could probably teach a creative writing class with this thread. So I know this kid who was homeschooled. He broke his arms. I'm a boomer. Had a guy I grew up with become a psych prof just to get laid. He stated that the only guys getting laid by young women while in their 60s are college professors and billionaires. I would see him at weddings every so many years. The last time I saw him, he was in his 40s and had been teaching at a smallish private college. He wasn't married, but openly admitted to regularly hooking up with students and would boost grades. F's wouldn't go to A's, but would go to C's. His date at the wedding was a student. It didn't hurt that he was always that guy that women drooled over. I think being a good looking guy with women throwing themselves at him from the time we were in middle school made him shallow. Are you asking for tips? Just the tips. I was homeschooled, so utter rejection every time. Should have broken your arms. A friend of mine flashed our recon teacher senior year for a better grade. She has amazing tits, and she said he didn't say anything, and then she walked out. She got an A. Senior year, please tell me she was legal. I was 19 in senior year lol.